Now it is all being recorded though.
So we better be very careful what we say.
So Rabbi, let me know when you're ready to start. I will mute everybody, including you, and then you'll have to unmute yourself. But
Well, we'll give it another minute or so,
okay.
but we have a lot going on, so we want to start pretty much on time.
Nephew just joined. Oh, Joe McAleer.
Oh yeah, Mark, your niece or your nephew's on here, your sister's on here. I'm like seeing who's logging in.
Half of the crowd is our family, I think. Craig, your brother.
Both families, your Beth Israel family and your family.
All right, Becca.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody. So when Q&A comes, you will unmute yourselves.
And you'll highlight
Yep.
Mark and Sarah when they do theirs. Welcome, everyone. Tonight is the first of 2 Schleimut programs this spring. For the past 2 years, our Schleimut team has been hyper-focused, looking for ways to reach out to so many who have been ill, who have suffered losses, those who are in need of a listening ear. During this period, our lifelong learning classes often highlighted the teaching of different values that ground the ethical and moral decisions that we make as Jews. And in so many of those classes, we found ourselves highlighting the concept of pikuach nefesh, of how saving a life is indeed the highest priority that we have in the Jewish tradition. One can even violate our most important mitzvot, including Shabbat, in order to save a person's life. There is no doubt that at least in my lifetime, there has been no international effort as intense and as important as the development of the various vaccines that we've seen for COVID-19 that saved untold millions of lives around the world. Tonight, we're going to hear a little of those behind-the-scenes stories of how vaccines are developed, and we'll answer questions that you may have. But first, we're going to have, since this is a Schleimut program, some interactive Schleimut trivia led by Sarah Shapiro, our Schleimut social worker, and Becca's going to be helping out, designed to give everybody here before Mark comes on a better idea about this important Beth Israel program. So Sarah.
Thank you. So we thought we would just take this opportunity. Some of you may be very familiar with Schleimut, some of you may not be. So we thought we'd take this chance to either familiarize you or refamiliarize you with Schleimut. So we're going to use a brief online quiz. In a minute, you're going to see a question pop up on your screen. Once everyone's had a chance to respond and we review the results, I'm going to share the correct answer and a bit of background information. And then we'll repeat this process for 4 additional questions to round out your knowledge of Schleimut. So here we go. First question.
Bear with me 1 second. It appears that when multiple people have logged in from the same account, so we might not, it appears that they're not working because there are multiple people signed in from the same account.
Okay.
Rabbi Goldstein, is it working on your end?
No.
Okay, so unfortunately, this was not something that we had accounted for. I did not know that this was going to happen. I apologize. So Sarah, I think
Okay.
you might just have to do this just with asking the questions. I'm very sorry.
Okay, so it'll be like a go to your buzzer kind of thing.
You can, Sarah, you can talk and I'll look and we can ask people that can sort of go A, B, C, D and raise their hands and what they say.
Exactly.
The
Yeah,
ones that I
that's
can
what,
see on screen, so.
okay. So that's what we're going to do. So the first question is, in what year was Schleimut introduced at Beth Israel? A, 2003, B, 2005, C, 2007, or D, 2008? So we'll go back. How many people think 2003?
You could also put answers in the chat and we can keep an eye
That's
there.
a good
too.
idea.
I
Yeah.
apologize, everybody. I did not know this was gonna.
No worries. Okay, how about 2005? And 2007? And 2008. Okay, so
We had some, some of
mix.
each of those, yes.
yes, so the correct answer is 2005. Yay, for the Madoffs, I saw you raised your hands. So Schleimut, meaning wholeness in Hebrew. It's, oh, here it is. Look at that. It came up, Becca. So
It
we'll
did.
use, it
For
just
you,
came up.
did?
Yeah.
Okay,
Did it come up for anybody else?
It came
No.
up for me. It came up for the Madoffs.
Okay, Madoffs.
Yes, it
I
did.
have it.
I can see
Okay.
it.
I have it also.
Great. Okay, so we'll be able to use it in a moment for the next questions. Okay.
Glad that it unhiccuped.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I just want to share that Schleimut, meaning wholeness, is Beth Israel's effort to attend to the holistic needs of congregants. The idea for the program began back in late 2000, when Rabbi Nina Beth Cardin, who was then the director of Jewish life at the JCC, developed an interest in bringing congregationally based healing programs to the Jewish community. And then in September 2005, with funding from the local Foundation for Spirituality and Medicine, a pilot program was launched by Jewish Community Services at Beth Israel and Temple of Shalom, with the goal of providing a proactive and integrated response to congregants in need. So now I want to ask you, how many components are there in Schleimut? So if you look on your screen under question 2, you'll see you can pick 2, 3, 4, or 5. So everybody should take the chance to vote now just on that question, and we'll see what folks think.
Can't submit it.
Right.
Yes,
It's
vote
going
and
to let us submit when we answer all of them, it looks like.
Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't we take a moment then to everybody can answer each question, and then we'll go back and review them one at a time. So there's how many components are there in Schleimut? What is the most common reason for referral for social work consultation services? What was Schleimut's most comprehensive educational program? And there's 4 choices there. And what's the best way to access a member of our Schleimut team? So take a few minutes to look through and respond to those questions. And you'll need to go back and respond to question 1, I believe, so that you'll be able to submit.
And I just lost mine in the
Yeah,
middle.
the whole thing disappeared.
Oh my.
Right. I think we should just forget it.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna forget doing that. I'm gonna close it out of
We've
my
become
screen, at least.
technologically advanced, but I guess not this technologically.
Yeah, okay. So the choice for how many components are there in Schleimut? Are there 2? Are there 3? Are there 4? Or are there 5? There are 5. So Since its inception in 2005, Beth Israel's Schleimut team has touched the lives of many people in our congregation through and the schools by providing confidential support and guidance through the clergy, a Schleimut social worker, and a nurse. But then in 2019, the Schleimut team expanded to include legal information and guidance for congregants and school families. And then in 2021, Schleimut added Re'im, a fifth component to its array of services. And the Re'im program is designed to provide an empathetic, compassionate companion to walk alongside a member of the community who is going through a difficult time or life transition. So today, Schleimut helps Beth Israel congregants manage their physical, mental, legal, and spiritual health needs by offering opportunities to consult with a nurse, a social worker, a Re'im team member, an attorney, and the clergy. So whether you're seeking help managing a physical illness, navigating a life challenge or transition, answering a legal question, or exploring spiritual concerns, our Schleimut team is here for you. Now for question 3. What do you think is the most common reason for referral for social work services? I'll give you the 4 choices and then we'll go back through. So bereavement, cancer support, health issues, or mental health issues. So how many people think the most common reason is bereavement? And how about cancer support?
Wow, yours is loud.
How about health issues?
Muted.
And mental health issues. So it looks like we have a smattering again of votes for different ones. So the answer is bereavement. So between 2005 and 2021, the Schleimut social worker, that's me, responded to over 1,500 referrals from the clergy, professional and administrative staff, teachers, family members, congregants, and friends, as well as from people who self-referred to talk to a social worker. And by far the most common reason for referral was for those who are grieving a loss, followed by those who are seeking support for a health issue, cancer, or mental health concerns. And then some other common reasons for referral include caretaker support, counseling and resources for aging parents and other seniors, parenting guidance, and information and resource referral. Our 4th question, what was Schleimut's most comprehensive educational program? Again, 4 choices. A, Aging Matters, helpful answers to complex questions about growing older. B, Health Matters, an health education and resource fair. C, Letting Go, workshops for parents of adult children at various life stages. Or D, Wise Aging. So first, Aging Matters. What do we think? We're looking for the most comprehensive educational program. B was Health Matters. And C is Letting Go, the workshops for parents of adult children. And the last is Wise Aging. Okay, so some of this is subjective, but in my mind, the answer is Aging Matters. So another valuable component of Schleimut over the years has been its educational and support programming. So through synagogue-wide programs, workshops with religious school and preschool parents, students and faculty, and then joint programs with all the different silos. So sisterhood, brotherhood, Keruv, adult education, Beth Israel's Chavara. There have been a myriad of health and mental health issues that have been addressed. In 2011, Aging Matters was the program where we had a keynote speaker with Dr. William Thomas, 4 breakout sessions, a panel discussion, and a resource fair. But other noteworthy programs over the years include raising awareness about Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, domestic violence, depression, organ transplantation, planning for retirement, and what matters at the end of life. And we've also been able to offer Wise Aging, which is a 6-week peer group conversation designed to explore ways in which Jewish tradition and spiritual practice can help those in their 60s and 70s embrace aging with wisdom and joy. So a wide variety of programming, and many of you have been helpful in bringing those programs to life. So thank you. And lastly, what's the best way to access a member of our Schleimut team? A is by phone, B, email, C, in person, D, all of the above. So A, phone, B, email, C, in person, D, all of the above. Bingo, all of the above. That is truly the answer. So while COVID sometimes limits our in-person consultations, we're still available to provide free confidential guidance and support over the phone or the computer for any concerns you or a loved one may have. So please reach out by phone or email, and we'll be happy to schedule a time for us to connect. So thank you. I hope you've learned a little bit about Schleimut. And I think now we're going to turn back to Rabbi Goldstein for a bit of an intro.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So once again, welcome everyone. Our guest speaker tonight for our Schleimut program is Mark Schenerman. Most of us, of course, know him well as an active participant at Beth Israel for decades, along with Amy, a past Brotherhood president, involved in so many ways in the synagogue and community. Tonight, we're going to hear from Dr. Schenerman, who is president of CMC Biotech Mass Consulting, founded by him, and Mark is advising academic and industry and regulatory agency groups. He's also a professor of the practice of biotechnology at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where he teaches a course on biopharmaceutical development and regulation. And prior to that, he was a senior advisor in chemistry, manufacturing, and control technology strategy at Novavax. Dr. Schenerman is an experienced biopharmaceutical scientist, over 30 years in the industry and 23 years working at MedImmune and AstraZeneca. At MedImmune and AstraZeneca, he headed an R&D group of over 200 scientists that performed structural and biological characterization of preclinical and clinical products, technology transfer. And prior to joining MedImmune, he held positions in biologics development and research and developments at Bristol. Myers-Squibbs was a postdoctoral fellow, bachelor's degree at University of Maryland, and his doctorate in biochemistry and molecular biology at University of Florida. Now you understand why Amy said everybody's joining from the family to hear a talk that is very down to earth and answering our questions as lay people that may not even be able to pronounce a lot of the things that I had to do in the introduction. So with no further ado, Mark, please. And I would encourage everybody to put your screens on speaker view so that you see larger on the screen what Mark will be showing.
Thank you, Rabbi. So it's my great pleasure to be here tonight and talk with you about vaccines. And the reason why this has kind of come up at this time is mainly because of conversations that I've had with friends, family, and other colleagues. There's obviously a lot of information that we hear. We're kind of overwhelmed with information every day about vaccines. It's hard to know what's good information and what's misinformation. So I thought tonight could be a good opportunity to sort of get down to the basics. First, we're going to define exactly what vaccines are. And then over the course of the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, we're also going to talk about the immune system. And your immune system is your body's defense against infection. It's quite complex, but we're going to try to put it in very simple terms so that you can easily understand. Everyone can understand. And in order to understand what happens when your body responds immunologically, you have to understand what happens when you get an infection. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then there's a wide variety of different types of vaccines. We're not just going to talk tonight about COVID. I know that's on everyone's mind, But it's also important to understand that there are a wide variety of different types of vaccines that are quite different from COVID vaccines. And then lastly, but really most importantly, where can you get more information, particularly reliable information? As I said, there's a lot of information out there, and a large part of it is misinformation. So it's very important to have a good place to go where you can get reliable information.
Well, you should have left it alone.
But just ask everybody if you could please stay on mute, that it'd be a little more clear for the presentation.
The general has nothing more at heart than the health of the troops.
In the early years of the American Revolution, the Continental Army had more to fight than enemy soldiers. Smallpox was raging through the colonies, in some places killing up to half of the white settlers who fell sick, and taking an even deadlier toll on Native Americans, some of whom had been deliberately infected as a weapon of occupation. The British redcoats weren't too bothered. The majority had already survived the disease as children, but American-born soldiers were at great risk. George Washington, who'd had smallpox himself as a teenager, knew that many people were reluctant to be inoculated or protected by receiving a less deadly form of the virus. But facing devastating losses, Washington wrote to Congress that he had determined to inoculate all the troops and new recruits. This decision undoubtedly saved lives and was probably a big part of why they won the war. Vaccines are one of humanity's greatest triumphs, and their development arose from knowledge across the globe. People have been using antiviral technology for centuries. The type of inoculation they used in the Revolutionary War, rubbing infected pus onto a healthy person to give them a milder case, originated hundreds of years ago in Asia and Africa. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu brought it from Turkey to Europe. An enslaved black man named Onesimus introduced it from West Africa to North America. In the late 18th century, Edward Jenner discovered that patients exposed to cowpox were then protected from smallpox. He called the procedure vaccination, after the Latin word for cow. By 1900, we had vaccines against cholera, rabies, typhoid, and plague. And over the next 100 years, things really started to snowball. Vaccines offer incredible protection against formerly deadly diseases, and vaccination now saves more lives than any other medical procedure. But how do vaccines work? Let's look at what they're trying to do in the first place. Our natural immune system is pretty incredible. Think of it like a chef with lots of recipes. It can cook up resistance to a whole slew of diseases. Vaccines, then, are like cookbooks, instructions that teach our chefs great new recipes. Most vaccines use either a weakened or dead form of a virus, or a harmless piece of its shell to excite our immune system. They deliver the ingredients for immunity to our bodies. And using those ingredients, our immune systems whip up a recipe to protect us from a virus. So if we ever meet that virus down the road, our immune system remembers how to get rid of it. For decades, researchers have been working on another type of vaccine, a messenger RNA, or mRNA vaccine. mRNA is already inside all of us. Its job is to relay instructions for making proteins, molecules that do all kinds of work in our bodies, like keeping our cells together, helping our muscles move, and protecting us from viruses. An mRNA vaccine delivers really specific and efficient instructions to our immune cells. In the case of COVID-19, the mRNA tells our bodies how to make a spike protein from the shell of SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19. Our immune cells cook up the recipe and voila, produce a harmless but recognizable spike. So our immune system learns how to spot and destroy SARS-CoV-2 without ever being exposed to the actual virus. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we were able to develop mRNA vaccines so quickly because researchers have been working on the science behind them for more than 30 years. But a safe and successful vaccine takes more than scientists. For a vaccine to be recognized as safe and efficient, it has to go through numerous tests, The 3 final phases are testing in volunteers, folks from all kinds of backgrounds. Each involves more people at every level, and all new vaccines go through these trials, including the COVID-19 vaccines. Scientists, medical professionals, and volunteers from all over the world made this happen faster than ever before. But even as vaccination numbers climb in the COVID-19 pandemic, there's more work to be done. People must have access to vaccines and the education to move from hesitance to confidence. It's within our power to end this pandemic, and vaccines will get us there.
So that was a great little summary of how vaccines work, and also gave you a good idea of how the COVID-19 vaccines work using messenger RNA technology, which we're going to cover in a second. By the way, the most important part of tonight's presentation is your questions. So please feel free throughout the presentation to put your questions in the chat. If you want to ask your question verbally, please hold it until the end. We will allow you to open up your mics at the end and ask questions directly. So first, I think it's useful to talk about the immune system because it is your body's defense against all types of infection. Your immune system uses a wide variety of tools to fight infections. Your blood contains really 2 different major types of cells. There's either red blood cells that carry the oxygen to tissues, or there's white blood cells that are involved in immune fighting infection. So among the white blood cells, there's various different types. First, there's what's called a macrophage. These are white blood cells that actually gobble up invaders, which are called antigens. So germs are called antigens. And these cells are sort of like little Pac-Men. They will open up and swallow all types of unknown things that are circulating in your body. If they're recognized as foreign, then these cells will gobble them up and destroy them. Next type of cell is called a B lymphocyte. And these cells are also defensive white blood cells. These are the cells that produce antibodies. And we're going to hear a lot about antibodies. I'm sure you've heard on TV or radio, whatever, that antibodies are very important to your immune defense, and they are, but they're not the only part of your immune defense, because the next part is T lymphocytes. And this is what's called your cellular immunity, because these types of cells enable your body to directly attack foreign cells that are in your body. So when a cell becomes infected, that cell is recognized as foreign, and your T cells can attack it and kill it. And T cells are also responsible for immune memory. So once you're immunized with a vaccine, you want it to last for a long time. T cells are really what determine how long your immune memory will last. These are the components of your immune system. And maybe you can remember when you go in and your doctor does a physical exam, your doctor is going to be feeling around different parts of your body. Like, for example, your doctor may feel around your neck to see if there's any swelling. The reason for that is because there are lymphatic glands in your neck. And your immune system, if it's responding, for example, to an infection, there'll be large numbers of these immune cells that are in the lymphatic system and will be pooling in these areas of the tonsils and the adenoids and in the neck. So your doctor will feel swollen glands when you have an infection. Same thing occurs just under your armpits. There's another auxiliary lymph node. So again, if you have an infection, sometimes you can feel a swelling under your arms. The thymus is the source of T cells. That's why they're called T cells, because they originate in the thymus. All the cells in your body originate in the bone marrow. So your blood cells, your red blood cells, and your white cells all originate in the bone marrow. and then they circulate throughout the body through the circulatory system. And basically all the organs in your body are involved in immune responses. Your spleen is sort of a reservoir where immune cells can pool. And then there's the Peyer's patches in your intestine. And then there are other lymph nodes in your legs. So I mentioned this before, but this is really important to remember that B cells actually make antibodies. And antibodies are what everybody hears about that's important in responding to an infection. Antibodies are very critical, and we'll see why in the coming slides. T lymphocytes actually kill invaders directly, and they also remember the immune response. So these cells are the ones that are responsible for a long-lasting immune response. When you, for example, when you get a tetanus vaccine, you only need to get a booster every 10 years. That's because your T cells are remembering that initial shot that you got 10 years ago. So what actually happens when you get an infection in your body? Well, the first time your body encounters an infective agent like a germ, it can take a few days to make all the tools that are needed to get over the infection. After the infection, your immune system remembers what it learned, how to protect the body against that particular germ. And then there's always some T lymphocytes, again, they're called memory cells, that go into action quickly again if the body encounters that same germ. And then when these, remember, antigens are the foreign parts that are not recognized by your body. When these foreign things are recognized by your body, then it causes the B lymphocytes in your body to produce antibodies. And that's very important later on. Say you're immunized with a vaccine, and let's use the tetanus example again. 2 years later, you cut yourself. Now you're exposed to the tetanus bacteria. Your body recognizes now the tetanus bacteria and very rapidly produces antibodies against tetanus, so you will not get the disease. So different diseases will cause different types of antibodies, and the antibodies are customized for the different type of infective agent. So, for example, we can look at measles. Measles has this particular shape on its outer surface, and you can see that antibodies against measles will develop that same shape, so that it's like a lock and key kind of configuration. And then you look over here to chickenpox. Chickenpox has a slightly different shape, but the antibody again will mold itself to the lock and key sort of configuration, so it's a perfect fit. Same thing with flu. Flu has a different shape, and the antibody has a different shape. But when your body is exposed to a totally new pathogen, your body cannot produce an antibody. And that's exactly what happened with COVID, because nobody on Earth had ever been exposed to COVID, therefore nobody could produce antibodies against it. So let's talk for a minute about the different types of vaccines. And you can see from this list, there's a lot. There might be more vaccines than you ever knew about or thought about. We're going to talk about each one individually just for a few minutes so you can get a basic understanding of the differences between them. There's what's called a live attenuated vaccine. So live sounds a little scary, but it's attenuated, which means it does not cause disease. So it's an actual live virus, so to speak, even though viruses aren't really live, but it's changed, it's altered so that it cannot give you a disease. And these are very effective vaccines. We'll see some examples of them a bit later. Inactivated vaccines are probably the most popular category. This is taking basically a vaccine protein and then treating it with a chemical so that the protein, so that the virus is no longer infectious. And then that treated material is what's used to immunize people. And we'll see examples of this one later on as well. Toxoid vaccines are also a very large category. Toxoids are meant to mimic things that are on the surface of bacteria. So we'll see some examples of those later on. Subunit vaccines are also a very big category of vaccines. This is meant to be, again, just a portion of the virus, like the very surface of the virus, not the whole virus. So you're just taking a portion of the virus. It's not live, it never was live, and you're stimulating the body with just that portion of the virus. Conjugate vaccines are basically proteins that are chemically connected to each other to, again, simulate what it looks like on the surface of a bacteria or a virus. Messenger RNA vaccines are just what you heard about in the video just a few minutes ago. It's basically just messenger RNA, but you'll see later on the messenger RNA is actually enclosed in a capsule to protect it. And then lastly is what's called a viral vector vaccine. This is, again, is a form of a live virus vaccine, but the purpose of this live virus vaccine is actually to deliver nucleic acid material into your cells and reprogram your cells. So we're going to see examples of each one. First, live attenuated vaccines, and these are actually the oldest category of vaccines. They can be used to fight both viruses and bacteria. They contain a version of a living, and we'll use that term sort of in quotes, because viruses, you could debate whether they're actually living or not, but they are actively able to infect. But they're a weakened form of the virus, so it does not cause disease in people. But because the vaccines are the closest thing to a natural infection, they're very good at teaching the immune system how to respond to the virus. So live attenuated vaccines include measles, mumps, rubella, which is called MMR, and also the nasal flu vaccine is called FluMist, which happens to be a product that I worked on. But even though these types of vaccines are very effective, not everyone is appropriate to receive these types of vaccines. Children that have weakened immune systems, for example, are really not good candidates, or people who are undergoing chemotherapy. So they should really receive different types of vaccines. Next is what's called inactivated vaccines. They're also very effective against fighting viruses and bacteria. Again, these types of vaccines are made by inactivating or killing either the virus or the bacteria during the process of making the vaccine. And examples of this are inactivated polio and flu vaccines. So most of the flu vaccines you get at the pharmacy most likely are inactivated flu vaccines. Inactivated vaccines can stimulate immune response in different ways than live attenuated vaccines. So often you have to get multiple doses to build up immunity and maintain that immunity. That's why you need boosters of inactivated vaccines. Next is toxoid vaccines, and these mainly prevent diseases caused by bacteria because bacteria produce toxins or poisons. So the vaccine is actually against the toxins, and the vaccine is made to look like a toxin, but it's a weakened toxin. So your body thinks that it's a toxin and responds to it and produces antibodies against the toxin. But this weakened form cannot cause any illness. So your immune system is stimulated using the toxoid and learns how to fight off the natural toxin. And an example of this type of vaccine is the diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccine. So that's, again, against diphtheria and tetanus. Next is subunit vaccines. And as I said earlier, these are vaccines that are made against parts of a virus or a bacteria. So it's not the entire germ, it's just a part of it. And because these vaccines only contain the essential foreign parts of the bacteria, all the other parts that make up the active bacteria are not present, so you have less side effects. And an example of a subunit vaccine would be pertussis for whooping cough, which is a component of the DTaP vaccine, and also recombinant shingles vaccine, or Shingrix, is an example of a subunit vaccine. Conjugate vaccines are also very effective against fighting bacteria. Bacteria have an outer coating with a sugar-like substance, which is called polysaccharides. And these can sort of disguise the bacteria from your immune system. So a conjugate vaccine is very effective because it will teach your body to respond to these polysaccharides and develop antibodies against these outer coatings on the bacteria. And an example of this type of vaccine is called Haemophilus influenza, or HIB, and also the pneumonia vaccine is this type. Next is messenger RNA vaccines, which we just heard about, and these are delivered to your body in a shell, as I said before, and this is called a liposome. And the reason for this we're going to hear about in a couple minutes, but messenger RNA is very fragile. It's very easily degraded. So you have to, in order to deliver it into your cells, you need to have something to protect it. So you use these things called liposomes, which is sort of a shell that surrounds the messenger RNA and enables the messenger RNA to get inside your cells. Once it is inside your cells, it uses your cell's machinery to make the spike protein for COVID-19. And then the spike protein, your cell will put it on the surface, and that enables your immune system to be stimulated and then produce antibodies. And obviously examples of messenger RNA vaccines are the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Mrna Vaccine. And the last category is the viral vector vaccines. So viral vector vaccines use safe viruses, things that do not cause any sort of human disease, to deliver either DNA or RNA into your cells. And then that DNA or RNA will reprogram your cells to make the spike protein. And once the spike protein is on the surface of your cells, it stimulates your immune system to make antibodies. And examples of viral vector vaccines are the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is not yet approved in the US. So let's watch this quick video to learn more about vaccine safety.
First came the virus that had never been seen before, and that spread faster than we could ever imagine. Now we hear there's a safe and effective way to stop it. Vaccines that will protect millions from COVID-19. But can we really know they're safe after less than a year of testing? COVID-19 vaccines may be new, but vaccines are not. We've been using vaccines to protect against infectious diseases for over a century. 2 COVID vaccines are the first authorized vaccines ever to use a new technology, but even that technology, called messenger RNA, has been tested and studied by vaccine researchers for decades. We've learned how to make vaccines better and safer, and we've applied all that knowledge to COVID-19 vaccines. We also had a head start on COVID vaccines thanks to studies the National Institutes of Health had done. Scientists there actually created a vaccine that could be custom-made to fight different strains of coronavirus, like the virus that causes COVID. Using these studies, they were able to make a COVID-19 test vaccine just over a month after the disease was first reported. All vaccines have to be thoroughly tested before they can be marketed. During clinical trials, scientists measure and compare data on volunteers who receive a vaccine to those who receive a placebo, like an injection of saline. Most early clinical trials involve fewer than 3,000 volunteers, so it can take a year or more to get the data needed to measure how well vaccines work. Early clinical trials for COVID vaccines enrolled at least 30,000 volunteers each, so data on safety and performance were collected and analyzed in under 4 months. Vaccines are usually developed one step at a time, and companies wait until they have final approval to start manufacturing them. But addressing this pandemic couldn't wait. So government and industry invested millions of dollars to produce vaccines at the same time their test data was under review. This meant health departments and clinics started getting vaccine shipments a few days after the Food and Drug Administration's rigorous standards for safety were met, and the vaccines were authorized for public use. Thanks to extraordinary advances, science, industry, and dozens of government agencies have been able to work together to produce and deliver safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines in record time. Decades of experience and innovation led to this achievement, one that can keep you, your family, and your community safe from a serious and dangerous disease. Learn more, cdc.gov/coronavirus. We can do this.
Okay, and now we're going to watch another short video on how do messenger RNA vaccines work. And this is a really excellent video from the Mayo Clinic.
We've got 2 really effective vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. These vaccines are about 95% effective at preventing COVID disease. So these vaccines work by delivering some of this mRNA into our cells. The SARS-CoV-2 virus got a genetic code of its own. There's a little segment, a tiny little snippet of that actually codes for this spike protein. The spike protein is the thing that helps this virus get into our cells and infect us. mRNA is like a little recipe for how to make that spike protein. When we get these vaccines, our body makes that spike protein and we develop an immune defense to it without ever having to be exposed to the whole virus. It's not exposing us to the whole virus at all, live or killed. It's only allowing us to make a little bit of that spike protein, which is just a tiny portion of the virus, and then we react to that and become protected from the whole virus. mRNA in these vaccines can only get into the main part of the cell, but it can't get into the nucleus of the cell, which is where our own DNA lives. And it can't incorporate into our DNA. And it also doesn't live very long. It doesn't last very long. It's very fragile, and that's why it has to be stored at these ultra cold temperatures. It's not stable for very long. So it goes into the body, goes into the cell for a matter of hours and starts to make this protein. Then in the coming days, our bodies react to that protein, but that messenger RNA doesn't hang around, nor does it get into our DNA.
Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end, and we want to talk about what's the bottom line. Well, the bottom line is vaccines are very safe, very effective, and overall they're your best healthcare value. Some people believe that naturally acquired immunity, that is immunity from actually getting the disease itself, is better than immunity provided by vaccines. However, natural infections can cause serious complications and can be deadly, like for COVID. And this is true even for diseases that many people consider mild, like chickenpox. So it's impossible to know which infections will be serious and may lead to hospitalization. So vaccines also, just like any other medication, can cause side effects. The most common side effects are usually mild, usually things like redness, soreness in the muscles, that kind of thing. But even with advances in healthcare, the diseases that vaccines prevent still can be very serious. So vaccination is the best way to prevent them. And with that, we're going to pause for your questions. These are some frequently asked questions, but we can certainly open it up now to any other questions that people might have.
So Mark, do you want to, it might be easier if you stop sharing the screen, and that way you can.
Yep, sure. Anybody have any questions?
Well, so there were two questions that were in the chat.
Okay.
So I'll read them if you want, or if you can see them.
Yes, I can see them. Let me see. During the pandemic, I stopped. Okay. Pre-pandemic, I used to donate blood several times per year. During the pandemic, I stopped because I figured that if my blood has antibodies in it, I didn't want to deplete them by giving away a pint of blood. Did I make the right decision? Okay, so great question. Your body makes plenty of antibodies, lots of antibodies. And when you give a pint of blood, you're really not giving a significant amount of those antibodies away. So it really wouldn't cause any danger to you by giving blood. So, but it's a great question. Is there a way to measure T memory cell immunity? Yes. It's quite a complex and challenging thing to do, but there are ways to do it. There are things, there are instruments, specialized instruments that can measure surface markers on T memory cells, and only certain labs in the world have that type of specialized equipment. So it's not something that's routinely done in hospitals, but it can be done in some research labs. Next, I heard a very good technical meeting in late January with data showing the deterioration rate and the need for a booster. Why did our government take more than 9 months to agree to it? That's a great question. I think that the FDA and the CDC are very conservative, as they should be, with vaccines, because vaccines need to be safe first. That's the most important thing. So both of those organizations are driven by data, and there has to be a significant amount of data to justify additional dosing in people. So in the case of justifying a booster, there has to be enough data to be certain that the immune response rate is depleted. And while there might have been early data to suggest that, there wasn't definitive enough data. So that's why it took the extra time. It's also because this was a brand new vaccine. Again, those agencies tend to be a little bit more conservative with a brand new vaccine. And the other factor that has to be considered is that there's only so much vaccine to go around. And there was some concern that if the government recommended early boosting in the US, that there wouldn't be enough vaccine to go around to the rest of the world. So that's a great question, thank you. What about a fourth booster, and when? companies have already submitted data to the FDA to justify not a fourth booster, it's a fourth shot. It would be a second booster. That is being considered now by the FDA. So we'll probably hear something more about that in the coming weeks. Is there enough evidence that the second booster really helps? Yes, there is very strong evidence that a second booster dramatically raises the level of antibodies against COVID. And that seems to be our best marker of vaccine effectiveness. Although, as we heard in the presentation, antibodies are not the only aspect of your body's immune response. So just going only by antibody responses alone may not give you the complete picture of your body's immune response. Where do we find accurate information that a layperson can understand? That's my next slide, so I'll show you that in a second. Is there a constant with the spike protein in all COVID-19 viruses? Very good question. The spike proteins are very similar to each other, but the virus mutates very rapidly. So that's why we hear about these variants. And variants are mutations in the spike protein that cause minor or major changes in the composition of the spike protein. We've all heard about Omicron. Omicron was a major change. It was 30 to 40 amino acids being changed. That's quite a major change. There are regions of the spike protein that are constant, but there are some that seem to mutate a little more frequently than others. So it's a hard question to answer completely. I'm supposed to get my second booster tomorrow. Is it safe? I would say absolutely. There is very strong data to say that the approved COVID-19 vaccines that are currently on the market are very safe and effective. I think that was all the questions I see in the chat. Any other questions live? By the way, I always tell my students at UMBC, the only bad question is the one you didn't ask, which I think actually comes from the Talmud. But please.
So I saw Sandra Salkoff has her
Yes.
hand up.
Taking a large guess, how often do you think we will be required to get boosters?
Yeah, that's a great question. My guess is long-term, it's probably going to be annually. It's going to be similar to the flu vaccine. And in fact, some companies are already evaluating putting the flu vaccine together with the COVID vaccine, so you only have to get one shot.
Interesting. I'm getting my booster, second booster on Tuesday.
Great. Glad to hear it. I already got mine.
There's another question in the chat there.
Oh, will the vaccine change with all the new variants coming out? Great question. So as I mentioned before, because the Omicron was so dramatically different from all the other variants, some of the vaccine companies are starting to work on a specific vaccine that would be more reactive with Omicron. It's very difficult to make a new vaccine every time there's a new variant. So that's why we have to closely monitor the level of infection when a new variant comes out and how people are responding, especially people that have already been vaccinated. We know that people that have already been vaccinated, when they get infected with Omicron, it's called a breakthrough infection, but that is only very minor. It doesn't cause serious disease. So that means even though Omicron changed dramatically from the initial virus, the vaccine is still protecting very well against it. The new variant called BA.2 is a sort of a minor change from Omicron. It is spreading rapidly in Europe, but the thinking so far is that people that have already been vaccinated will probably be also protected against BA.2. Should you stay, wait a minute.
There's 3 new ones.
Yeah, there's 3 new ones. If you get really sick from a vaccine, does that mean it worked better for you and maybe you don't need a booster? No, I don't think so. First of all, if you get sick from a vaccine, the first thing you should do is talk to your doctor. It doesn't necessarily mean that you had a long-lasting reaction, and it certainly does not mean that you don't need a booster. Really, everyone should get a booster because it's part of the standard procedure for making sure that your immune system has been properly trained to maximally respond against COVID. Should you wait a certain amount of time between the first and the second booster? Yes. So this is different for Pfizer, BioNTech versus Moderna. Again, you should consult your pharmacist or your doctor, but there's a different wait period between the 2 vaccines. Should you stay with the same type of vaccine with the booster? Okay, so great question. There have been some studies where patients have been immunized first with the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine and then received the Moderna and vice versa, and there haven't been any differences noted. So I think the recommendation is you can use either or. Why does immunity wane so rapidly after receiving the series of vaccinations and booster doses? That is a really great question, and I think nobody really knows the answer yet. A lot of scientific groups are working on this. It probably has something to do with the COVID virus being very good at evading the immune system, tricking the immune system. So it prevents the immune system from having that long-lasting memory that other vaccines typically have. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there have been a lot of people who have, even though they've been boosted and vaccinated and everything else, they have gotten sick, and I have heard of actual deaths. Is that because of the variants and I don't know, I mean, what is the reason for that?
So people that have been vaccinated still died, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not very aware of that. There may be a very small percentage. The Pfizer and Mrna vaccines are both greater than 90% effective. So among that 10%, there could be some people that didn't respond for whatever reason. Could be that their immune system was compromised and they didn't know it. So it's hard to say what the reasons might be behind that. Any other questions before I go to the information slide? Because somebody already asked the question about information.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for this excellent talk, and everybody will benefit from it. Get your vaccines, please. But so what I'm really excited about the mRNA technology that we've been reading in the medical literature is the medical uses that besides vaccinations. Have you studied it, or because it's amazing what they've found? They can turn off proteins in cells that are deadly. And I've seen studies on this, and they can add proteins. There's a lot of good technology, a lot of good medical, non-vaccine related medical advances on this technology. So it's very exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And before the pandemic started, I think some of the videos mentioned that this technology has been worked on for 30 years now. Right. Really, the main force of it was being used to treat cancer. And there are lots of oncology applications now for messenger RNA. It's interesting that you bring it up because what I'm working on now is what's called cell therapy. So it's programming the cells in your body, the immune cells in your body, to recognize cancer cells and kill them. And you can do that using messenger RNA. So yes, it's a fabulous technology. It's very exciting what it can do. And it's really just the beginning of the applications for it. So we're going to see a lot more coming in the future. There's a question about, is the seroconversion rate significantly lower as we age? Yes. As you get older, your immune system has less of an ability to respond as vigorously as it did when you were younger. So for example, with the flu vaccine for people that are over 65, you're typically going to get a higher dose of the flu vaccine than people that are younger. And the reason is because your immune system does not respond as vigorously when you're older. Great question. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to put up the informational slide because someone asked, how do I get more information? So these are reliable sources of information. And my number one source of information every day is the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And you can go on to the website of the Johns Hopkins Center, which is centerforhealthsecurity.org, and there's a fabulous amount of information. You can also sign up to get a daily or weekly email that will tell you all about what's happening with COVID-19. So it's what, to me, why it's the best source of information is because it's coming directly from the scientists. It's not filtered through any media. It doesn't come from a newspaper. It doesn't come from online news source. It comes directly from scientists. And these are epidemiologists. These are public health professionals. It's really an excellent source. My second go-to source, and you can see I've got a bunch of videos from there, is the Center for Disease Control. And if you look at their site, particularly the area for COVID, there's a tremendous amount of information there that is all put in layman's terms. It's not scientific. Third down is the FDA. And I gave you the link directly to the COVID area for the FDA. There's a lot of good information right there. There's also, if you're looking for, right now vaccine is readily available, but there is a website if you can't find vaccine that can tell you locations of where you can find vaccine. Also, it is extremely valuable to have national statistics. And the New York Times, you can go onto their website and you can sign up to get a daily email that will tell you what the rate of case numbers is, hospitalizations and deaths in each individual state, and you can customize it to whatever you want. So that's a very useful tool. And then lastly, I would recommend the Baltimore Sun. Usually around page 10 or 11, there's a section called Coronavirus Outbreak, and it lists the number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths in every county in Maryland. I think we can, Rabbi, I think we can probably put this slide deck somewhere for people if they want to.
Yeah, we'll work on it. You can send it and we'll see if we can post it on our website.
Mark, if you send it as a PDF or even the whole slideshow, I can get it up.
Yeah, I can send it to you.
You did have another question that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had one more question. I put it in the chat. So you get your first shot and you get your second shot. Then you get your booster. Is the booster the same quality, the same thing as your first and second shot? I always had that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, it is the same dose as your first and second shot.
That's what I
exactly
want
the
to know.
same composition. The only thing that is different is the children's vaccine. And I think there was a question among the facts. Why do children get a different vaccine? Well, children typically do get lower doses than adults do. Clinical trials have to be done to test various doses to see what's effective in children and still safe. but typically the COVID vaccines for children are about half the dose for adults.
And your best estimate, when do you think the children will be approved?
So children 5 and up or above 5 are already approved.
Correct. Correct.
Children under 5 are the data is being accumulated and will be considered by the FDA.
Thank you.
Yep. Why are children's doses by age rather than weight? So it's very difficult to do vaccine trials by weight. Dosing in vaccine trials, first of all, you heard in some of the videos that these trials are very large. You can have 30,000 people in the trials. So it's really impractical to have to measure each person's weight and customize the dose in each individual person based on their weight. So you really can't do vaccine trials by weight. It has to be by unit dose. And as I mentioned before, children typically will get less of a dose. And companies have to do clinical trials looking at what the effectiveness is and the safety. And typically they would do what's called dose down. So they'll take the adult dose and they'll cut it in half, or they'll cut it in a quarter, and they'll see if the quarter is still effective. If it's not, then they have to go to the half. So it's kind of how that works.
There was another question of, are we getting close to herd immunity?
Okay, good luck.
Yeah, so every day we're getting closer to herd immunity. Herd immunity is really when 70 to 80% of the whole population has been immunized and would respond to another COVID vaccine challenge. It's very hard to say for people that haven't been vaccinated whether or not they have reached herd immunity, even if they were infected. So just because you were infected with COVID-19 doesn't mean that you have immunity, because the virus is very good at evading your immune system. So you might have only mounted a partial response. You could get infected again. So that's why it's very important to get vaccinated. Any other questions? Okay, lots of great questions. Thank you.
Mark, that it? You're done?
I think so, yes.
Okay, excellent. So once again, we're so grateful to Mark for such an in-depth, informative, and most importantly, engaging and simplified enough for those of us that may be technologically challenged with some of the terms. But we very much appreciate your help, and also to Sarah Shapiro for the little creative way of introducing Schleimut. Our next Schleimut spring program will actually be Thursday, May 12th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. We invite you to join with Rabbi Richard Address, who's the founder and director of Jewish Sacred Aging, for an in-depth discussion of Jewish approaches to caregiving and care planning, the wisdom and the resources to help us help our own loved ones during their times of need. So we'll be sending out the information for that. And Becca is going to put an evaluation link in the chat. So we would appreciate if you would take just a minute or so to fill it out. That would be wonderful. And we thank everybody for joining us this evening.
Thank you, everybody. I'll stay on for just a couple of minutes so that you can get the link. And if anybody wants to say hi or ask any more questions, I am going to stop the recording though. So
Thank you, Mark. That was